Hi, it's Chris from Epix Systems here. This is a short video to explain the application, certificate and invoicing process that you might go through with some of your jobs. Of course, some jobs go straight through the process of being costed and then directly to invoice, but there are certain scenarios where you may have to send an application for payment to your client. They may then send you a certificate, which you would then invoice for the value on that certificate. And this video is all about that process. We'll assume that you've managed to get your job through the costing process and now you're ready to invoice or apply for payment. So normally this would mean that you would have some jobs at a status of approved for charging or a similar wording, so maybe ready to be charged. As we can see, I've got 3 here, so if I click on those, we should get a list of the 3 jobs that I want to send to my client as an application. Now, as you can see, I've got 3 jobs here. All of them are the same client and on the same contract. Usually you would apply for payment for works for a particular client, and you may also do it if they're on a particular contract. Say that you apply for payment on the reactive works, but anything, say for the voids or the maintenance, you invoice directly for every job, for example. So this one here, I'm going to apply for payment for all 3. But if we did want to narrow our search results down, we could do that by using the filters up here. So maybe searching for a different contract and then updating our report appropriately. I'm going to begin by simply applying for all these. So I could, of course, tick them individually, or I could press select all. I can change the tax point date or the invoicing date on the application if I wish. It will default to today's date, but if you needed to do this retrospectively, then you could do. I then press process selected jobs, and this has now produced 3 jobs on application totaling this amount here. I could press print, which would launch a printout PDF of those applications, or I could press view. And what that does is it just shows us the 3 jobs and the 3 applications here. So I could click to go into each individual application if I wished, but I could also slide to the other side of the report over here, and I could select all of them and then print them together. So pressing print, this launches a PDF file where I can then look at each job on its own page, and as you can see, there are 3 here. And that document, of course, could be sent to the client. Let's assume that your application has now been sent over to the client. So if I now press on my home button here to refresh my system and ultimately refresh the dashboard, we'll see here that the approved for charging or ready for charging list has now disappeared. And that's because those 3 jobs that we just processed have now gone to the status of charged, where an application has been generated for them. Now, depending on how you manage the next step of this process, you may just simply stop at this point. You could well receive your certificate back from the client and then go into your accounts package, such as Sage, and generate an invoice from there for the total amount on that certificate, and just simply use your account system to do that. If, however, you want to record the certificate and record the payments against the actual applications within our system and then generate the invoice on us, then continue watching and I'll explain those steps now. So assuming in your hand you've now got a certificate totaling the amount that the client has agreed that you can invoice for, and that amount is for those 3 jobs that we've just done. On the menu item I've got up here, we have a certificate posting menu option. Now, of course, your system could look ever so slightly different, but you'd be looking for the certificate posting. So if we press on there, this takes us into the certificate entry screen. Let's assume our certificate has information a little bit like what you can see here. As you can see, this is a bit basic, but you get the idea. We've got a unique reference number which identifies the certificate, and the date, of course, which relates to this entire certificate of transactions. And then below we've got the job numbers that relate and the value, not including VAT. And then, of course, the total value there for what the client has said that we can invoice for, which is the sum of the 3 jobs. What we're going to do now is we're going to transfer this information onto this screen here. So we'll begin by typing the name of our customer, and then selecting that as it appears. The certificate date is what shows on the certificate itself, and of course we can change that using the date picker here. Likewise, the unique reference, we'd expect that to be on the certificate somewhere. So if we take a quick glance back at our certificate here, we can see SLA123 is the reference number. And as we can see, this is also a unique entry, so we're good to use that. If they didn't provide a unique reference, then that's quite okay. We could press the generate new button, a bit like you do when creating a job, to generate a unique reference number for this certificate. We are using a certificate, so we don't need to change the payment method. And the total, that's the total value of the entire certificate. So in this example, that is 427 and 3 pence. We can now start to build up the jobs or the applications onto the certificate. And so what we would do now, we would search for the references that feature within that certificate document here. So let's begin with this job number here. I'm going to copy that and very simply just paste it into here. And as we can see, we've got a match. So when I click on this, it knows what the job was for, and it knows that we're expecting a value of £94.21, and that's the value that we applied for, and also the value that is outstanding currently against that application. If you had recorded a previous payment for this, then the outstanding amount would be the total less what you'd already recorded. Now this job was indeed worth £94.21, and according to our certificate here, that's what the client has said. So we shall put £94.21, and then we'll press add. So that's now done. If we want to go back and edit it, we can do, or if we realise we've made a mistake and added the wrong line, we can also delete that here. But then what we'd do is we'd start again with the next row on our certificate, which is this reference. So if we paste that in there and select it, the value within our certificate document was exactly the same as this, so we shall record the same. And then press add. And then we'll repeat that for the final one, which is worth £67.16. And then we'll type £67.16 there. Now, before I press add, we can see the remaining total. That's the remaining total to match up to this. So currently we're adding up that, and we're just waiting on £67.16. And the moment we press add there, we've now got no total remaining. So that's our certificate entry complete. At this stage, now we're happy we're done, we can press continue. So that posting has now been saved against that certificate, and here is the summary of that. Now if there were any discrepancies at this point, this is the screen you would use to either pass those or write them off, or provide you with the opportunity to provide a discrepancy limit which you could automatically pass them. And these would be where, say for example, the client in this example may well have said you can invoice us for £90. So that would mean you were £4.21 short. If you had set a discrepancy limit up here of say £5, that would then allow you to just automatically write that off as you select them here. Now as you can see, this one's perfect, there's nothing to do here. We would just simply press pass, and that will pass this certificate into a past cash posting, which now allows us to convert this certificate into a invoice to invoice the client. Now again, at this point, you could just simply stop the process within the Epix system. You could now just go to your accounts software and generate an invoice for your client for the amount that you agreed on the certificate. If you want to proceed with us, the next stage of the process would be to convert the certificate into an invoice. And we do that by finding the certificate. So I'm going to do the creation date of today because I know that I've just done this. If I press search, you can see here, this is our certificate. There's our reference that we used. Here is the amount that it was on the total, and we've accepted the full total, and there is nothing outstanding and nothing written off. So if we click on this, this will open the certificate sheet. From this screen, all we do is we press Convert Certificate. And this takes us into a screen where we need to confirm some basic information about the job, the client, and so on, so that we can create the invoice and match it up with the correct contract and invoicing addresses that you want to use. We've already populated the net value of the invoice for you, and the reference is taking on the reference of the certificate. If you wanted that to be anything any different than that, then you could overtype that if you needed, but ordinarily you would leave that to be what the client has said on their certificate. And likewise down here we've pre-populated the invoice line, and we've said that this is the September valuation for the certificate with the reference here. Now of course again you can completely overtype that, and you could simply call it something a little bit more descriptive, perhaps to identify the jobs you've just done. Again, the tax point date, the invoicing date, you can change that if you need to, but it does default to today. Now there are 3 fields we need to complete. One of those is the VAT code. So I'm going to say that this is standard VAT. The contract that this relates to. Now this was the reactive contract for this customer, so I'm going to choose that again. And it already knows the invoicing address because it's already known this from the contract, and it's already populated that. You may have noticed that I did the ID there as you did it. But if I press on the question mark here, you can see I could also select the client invoice address as well. So we would have a look at this. We can review, of course, the jobs that comprise this invoice, and then all that's left is to press continue. And here we have the invoice sheet. It looks a bit like any other invoice sheet that you might generate from within the system. And to print that, you press print, and you'll end up with an invoice with the valuation, 1 line, and for the amount that they've requested. And that's the process. If you ever needed to find this invoice again, simply doing find sales invoice and their reference of SLA 123 should produce a search result of that invoice for you, which you can then go back in and reprint this should you wish. And of course you can also use the email function as necessary. That's the process for the entire flow between generating a series of applications, recording the certificate entries, and then converting that certificate into an invoice. As I alluded at various points throughout the video, you could stop at any point and not do the full process using us if you didn't need to. If you prefer, you can use your own account software to generate the invoice at any point along the way. Benefit to doing that in us is that you get to see the full audit trail against the job, and everything, including the payments and the invoice at the end, is attributed to the job, and the job is very complete within our system then. As ever, any questions that you might have on this, or indeed any other aspects of our system, don't hesitate to give us a shout.